Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, I welcome Murray Fife and Rachel Profitt from Microsoft to talk about the use of the Power Platform with Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. The Power Platform is obviously a broad tool set. It can be used by lots of different organizations, but when you're talking about Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, you can frame the Power Platform's capabilities much more specifically to the needs of those kinds of organizations. In an ongoing webcast series, Rachel, Murray, and some other Microsoft experts have been showing off different elements of Power Platform in the context of F&O. In one recent presentation, they took viewers through all sorts of ways that AI Builder, Microsoft's set of pre-built AI and ML-focused tools, can be used in the context of finance and operations. There's a whole lot of potential scenarios, and they looked at several of them. We also talk about how the uptake has been in the field so far, how partners are approaching AI Builder, where there's still a lot of room to grow, and what's coming next in terms of not just AI Builder, not just Power Platform, but in the context, once again, of finance and operations. As you'll hear, they have quite a few areas where they are very optimistic about new and upcoming features, some that are still in preview, some that are reaching general availability, and some interesting thoughts on the way that both partners and customers will shift their mindset and how they look at the value of Power Platform tools in the context, once again, of F&O. All right, I'm here with Murray Fife and Rachel Profitt from Microsoft. Hey, Murray. Hey, Rachel. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you, Jason?
Good. Thanks for joining today. I was glad to have this chance to talk because I wanted to learn a little more about some of the presentations you have both been doing and maybe others as well on the FastTrack team about, well, what's new and kind of exciting in Power Platform. Obviously, there's features, there's capabilities coming out all the time, but some of them are really, they kind of have a bit of a wow factor and I think really get customers' interest and partners' interest. And the one that I noticed that led me to want to talk with you both was a tour, I guess you would say, of some of the AI Builder's most interesting capabilities. AI Builder, obviously something that plugs in as part of Power Platform, and really, to me, is one of those areas that is really cool to see in demos and would seem to be kind of the future of the platform in a lot of ways. But I would love to just hear from you sort of how AI Builder is being received, maybe how you pitch it, like how you describe it to people who are new to it, and sort of what you've been talking to customers about.
You want to start us off, Murray?
Yeah, so I'll describe how we're leveraging AI Builder, because AI Builder is just part of the Power Platform now. And for those of you that haven't seen it, then what it's doing is it's taking all of the cognitive services capabilities that are up in Azure, and then democratizing them and making them into something that we can use directly within Power Automate and some of the other applications without needing to go and do any coding. And for me, there's a couple of different components in there that I like. For example, there's a inbuilt forms processor. So if you need OCR, then you can actually go in and you can train the model on invoices, and it's going to allow you to scan in invoices, pull them into maybe SharePoint or pull them in from an email, and then extract all the information out, and then we can go and use it to integrate into Dynamics. So we can push the invoice into the pending invoices within Dynamics, and then we can continue on with all of the other stuff that's normally within finance and supply chain. And then, but there's other capabilities. There's image recognition, or object detection, which allows us to go out and train based on objects, and it will find objects or count them and all of these other things. There's also text manipulation, where there's sentiment analysis and entity extraction, where you can give it a piece of text and it will pull out all the company names and all the person names and dates and all of these other things. So this AI Builder isn't just one thing. It's a number of these capabilities that are all AI that we can now use without the extra overhead of going into Azure. So that's what AI Builder is. when we position this or when we use this in demonstrations or show it to the customers, then it's really the simplicity that we highlight. And for example, going back to the invoice scanning and processing and forms recognition, a lot of people may not want to go to the more off-the-shelf capabilities that are available, even though those are really good. And maybe they just need to have some small situations where they're doing scanning and image recognition. So they can go out and do that without, again, just as a sort of like a citizen developer, no code, and then really take advantage of it. So in a nutshell, from a positioning standpoint, this is really democratizing a lot of AI capabilities for the users so that they can just get their feet wet with all of these AI capabilities.
Yeah, and I think, one of my favorite scenarios that we highlighted in the Tech Talk a few weeks back was the language translation. What you had done, Murray, was you translated a product description into another language with just a click of a button. So you created that in a Power App, used the AI builder with some flows behind the scenes. And we embedded that right into the user interface of finance and operations to make it, very easy for an end user to go use that functionality without needing to leave the screen where they're at.
And for your roles as part of the FastTrack team, how do you approach, working with AI Builder or talking to people outside of Microsoft about it? I'm thinking in terms of, are you typically talking to in like a pre-sales role? Are you talking to companies that have already either deployed F&O or maybe are in the process? I mean, where do you sort of fit in with the overall approach?
Sure. So FastTrack is a service that is for customers who have purchased a certain amount of licensing.
Mm-hmm.
So they're typically in the beginning stages of starting to roll out Dynamics 365. So the clients that I'm working with, my primary goal as a FastTrack architect is to provide architectural and technical guidance. So when they're looking at, okay, we've got these gaps, things that we can't do out of the box, or these problems that we're trying to solve and we're not sure what the best approach is, my job is to kind of offer up solutions to help fill those gaps. Or in some cases, maybe they said, hey, we want to use AI Builder and this is how we're thinking of using it. We want you to look this over and tell us, like, are we doing this right? Is this the proper usage of the technology? What do we need to think about that we may not have thought of? So a big part of what I'm doing is helping provide that guidance of like, hey, did you think of this? And then, once they've got a solution kind of drawn out, making sure that we're following best practices, that we've got good application lifecycle management in place, and trying to help reduce risk and increase, the time to go live, shortening that time as much as possible.
Yeah, and Jason, just to make sure that everyone's right. So I still work in the Global Black Belt group. So I'm just lucky enough to work with Rachel in the FastTrack team to help her along the way. And also, I think I'm lucky enough to work with Rachel because we actually worked together in a previous life at a previous company.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got the greatest respect for her.
Okay, yeah.
I used to joke and tell people that I taught Murray everything he knows about Dynamics 365. I don't think that's really true, but we like to give each other a hard time. But it's been fantastic, at least for me, from the FastTrack perspective, being able to pull Murray in to a lot of these tech talks that we're doing to get his perspective from the sales side of things. And I kind of pick it up after it's already sold.
And for anyone who doesn't know these roles, like global, and you can tell me if I have this right, but global black belt, Murray, is a role that is sort of an advocate and a supporter to like subsidiary organizations, to people outside of Microsoft corporate, within Microsoft though, who are going to market with business apps. Is that right?
Yeah, the global black belts are just a different group of technical specialists. So the people that do the demonstrations and do the sales side. But we're really a national resource rather than being sort of geographically allocated. So the global black belts here in North America support all of North America, East Coast, West Coast, Central, also LATAM and Canada as well. So we're the resource for the TSP resources within within here in Microsoft. And also we tend to dive into some of the functionality a little bit more deeper than most of the technical specialists do.
And Rachel, getting back to what you were saying about your role in FastTrack, I was actually surprised just in your description of it, how well aligned that is with what I already knew about FastTrack, which was, I guess, more of the sort of the infrastructure and sort of system health side of things, which I've heard from other, I think, members of that team on in the past, and the verifying the health of a system before it goes live, that kind of thing. But it sounds like what you're saying is your role is pretty well aligned with even that role as sort of a larger, maybe from a slightly broader perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as a FastTrack architect, one of the things that we do on the side are these tech talks. And we're given a fair bit of freedom in terms of, what types of topics and things that we want to do. And I created this tech talk series because I think, Power Platform has been around for a while now, but I wasn't seeing a lot of adoption of these features and functionalities with the finance and operations customers. And there's so much capability and so much power in the ability to kind of shorten your deployment time when you leverage these technologies, especially when you're looking at doing custom development, as an alternative. So I created this series out of like a passion for kind of evangelizing the Power Platform and helping people connect the dots, because there's all sorts of great documentation and learning and training and so on out there, on the Power Platform by itself. And there's a lot of great stuff out there for finance and operations, but you won't find a ton that shows how to put the two together. And so that's why I created this series, to try to help evangelize that and kind of open up this world of possibilities to the partner community and to customers out there who are looking to leverage these technologies.
Yeah, we'll post a link. I mean, those are all the recordings, I think, are all available at this point. Well, for the ones that you've done, at least up through at about part 10 or 11 at this point, it looks like that you've done. And this was one of the most recent. Yeah. So, I mean, what are some of the reactions that you do get, either maybe from this particular webcast that you presented, or more generally when you're talking with people outside of Microsoft and you do sort of frame something like AI Builder in the context of finance and operations? Do light bulbs go off? Do you get particular kinds of reactions?
Yeah, so I've received quite a bit of feedback and reactions from the community around, especially partners who were like, I had no idea I could do this with F&O. So a lot of kind of, thankful and positive feedback coming in through LinkedIn and emails. With my customers, what I'm seeing is that they're realizing that this isn't so big and bad and scary, and that we can, implement these things in a short amount of time and get a lot of benefit out of them. So I think in general, so far, the feedback that I'm receiving has been very positive.
Mm-hmm.
And, we get a lot of requests from people asking for the samples so that they can start to demo these in their own sales cycles, especially on the partner side of things. I don't know, Murray, if you've got other feedback that you've been receiving.
The thing that I found was interesting was with regards to the comments that we get during the tech talks that we're doing, because there are a lot of people that this is new to, but then they're just absorbing what we're showing. When it comes to the Q&A portion, we get some very insightful questions and pointed questions about functionality from customers and partners that obviously are using this and understand it, and are trying to work out their kinks and how they want to use it. So for me, I find that that's a really good indicator that there is traction for the Power Platform out there for things like AI Builder, and then a lot of the Power Automate things that we have out there. That's refreshing to see that there are people that are starting to use the Power Platform as an alternative to going out and doing the traditional coding that you used to have to do in order to go out and extend Dynamics 365. And this is such a more elegant way to make these changes as well, because it doesn't impact upgrades. And yet there's so many features that just the Power Platform and the connectors that we have are surfacing for us to take advantage of.
I could see there being a bit of a sort of a re-education process, because I just thinking back to when finance and operations was coming online, was starting to gain momentum, even probably before any AX customers had upgraded. It was mostly, in that sort of period, we're still very new in the first year to 2 years. One of the main talking points or pieces of conventional wisdom was you really want to minimize the customization. You can do customization, but try to rule it out. Try to go with standard or ISV solutions. And what you're saying, Murray, it seems like this sort of has to reset that conversation a little bit, because here's something that can bring in custom capabilities, but with a far smaller footprint or a far smaller cost, maybe on the system.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, for example, the example that Rachel mentioned before, which was a really fun example to put together, was the language translation. We were going through all the different scenarios inside AI Builder and trying to work out how could we use this, or what sort of scenarios we could have. And we looked at the language translation and we thought, that's really not a finance and supply chain sort of need. That's more like a customer service or something where you get an email to come in and you need to translate it. But then we thought that there's a lot of language, multilingual capabilities in Dynamics. So why don't we just create an app that uses Power Automate to go and create the language records, and do that in a very non-invasive way. So I don't know whether I'd consider that a customization. It's more like an automation, or not even an extension, because sometimes you want to go out and change the core functionality within the system, but sometimes you just want to streamline your business processes or streamline a certain manual process. And that's where these sort of changes come in. And it's not a customization is sort of the thing that I want to sort of highlight, or not a customization in my mind.
Right.
And I would agree with that. I think that's one of the things that I think I try to avoid the word customization or extension. It's more like a personalization or an automation. It's an improvement to a business process when we're talking about leveraging that Power Platform. I mean, to some extent, yes, it's a customization, but there was no code written to customize, this process. I really just personalized the experience and improved or automated that business process. And I think when we reframe it and stop, using terms like customization and extensions, it's easier to sell, I think, on some front, but it's also easier to implement and get people's buy-in on those enhancements.
What type of people are most interested in this? And when I say people, I mean roles, departments within the kind of customers you're working with, Rachel. Can you give any sense of that?
Sure. So, some of the kind of like, I would call them almost like your mid-level type users. They're, oftentimes they manage other people who do repetitive processes, or they're responsible for the overall business process, and a group of people who execute on that business process. I see those people being the ones that are most interested in this and see a lot of the value. They're able to, I think, connect the dots of what they do today with some of the examples that we're talking about and showing in our series. So I think they're the ones who, have the ideas. They know those business processes, the things that, their people do on a day-to-day basis, or maybe even themselves do these tedious processes that they want to make better, make more efficient, to allow time for other things. They're the ones I think that a lot of this is kind of resonating the best with, at least from what I've seen. I don't know, Murray, if you've had a different experience.
Sometimes the IT group can be a little bit of a downer, because they're concerned about maintaining sort of consistency and all of these things. But they can also be the biggest proponent, because we're talking to a customer right now about using AI Builder for invoice processing, and their whole organization, they're processing like 7,000 invoices, I think, a month, and they have a staff of like 20 people whose only task is to go out and take that invoice, and they're manually pushing it into an Excel spreadsheet and then somehow getting it into the system. And they're doing all of this manually. We showed the IT group how they could go out and start using AI Builder, and maybe not get rid of all the work, but at least get rid of the menial work, the work that's taking these people all this time to manage their invoices. So if the biggest proponents a lot of the time are the people that are doing all of this work, which is just laborious and hard and repetitive, and to be honest, not very exciting to do. So
that's interesting about the sort of the IT perspective, that they maybe have to be a little more convinced on some of what it actually deals with. Perhaps maybe it's some of the, the wounds of the past, that come into play with if there is resistance. I don't know.
There's a valid reason, because there's governance and there's control, and you have to make sure that that's in place. But once you've got the control, then you should let the users just do a lot of the things for themselves, and that's really the power of the Power Platform.
Yeah, I think you said it well, Murray.
All right. Do you have any other, data points or estimates or observations on at what point in the ownership of a Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations solution specifically, those customers are actually looking at this and bringing it in? Well, I guess I get both of your perspectives. Start with you, Rachel. When do you see it sort of gaining the most traction? Is it likely to be part of like the initial launch? Or I know I've talked to companies that have said, well, we're looking at it for the future. We'll go live without it, and then we'll phase it in or investigate it later.
Great question. In my projects, I generally don't see it until I recommend it or say that, this would be a quicker, easier, faster approach to something. And I think that's where a lot of my passion for this series kind of stemmed from. Until the partner community embraces this and I think sees solutions, I think we're going to continue to see people saying, because I don't think it's customers saying, oh, we'll wait until later to do that. I think it's partners saying, that's a scary thing. We don't know what that is. We don't know enough about it. We don't know how to estimate the efforts for it, whatever the reason might be. And saying, Power Platform is out of scope. I can't tell you how many times I've read SOWs or seen contracts that just flat out say Power Platform's out of scope. But like when you ask them about it, it's like, well, if I can do this and I can show you, like I'll help you do this. And sometimes in my FastTrack engagements, I've almost gone around and kind of said, all right, customer, I'll show you how to do this on your own so that you don't have to pay for a change order, so we can keep this project moving forward and on schedule and so on. So I think we need the community to embrace this more. And I think, I'm hopeful that the TechTalk series is helping bring light to some of these scenarios. And I think, in this kind of next phase, if you would, I would love to evangelize and get, some customers, some real life customer stories. And they do exist. I have customers that have done it. It's just getting someone to kind of break that ice and be the first one, to be the first one to walk out on the ice, if you will, and say, see, it's fine. It's thick enough. We can come out here and ice fish. I think we need more people to kind of share their success stories to hopefully break that pattern and get this to be part of the original designs and original scopes of more projects.
I can think of a number of situations where the Power Platform has been something that we've proposed right at the beginning, or as we're sort of going through the sales process. Because there was one customer, and they had a legacy AP invoicing system, and they knew that they'd have to do they're going to do a cutover, but they didn't want to run in parallel like some people do. But they also wanted to make sure that if they used Dynamics, then they could cross-reference back to the legacy system. So rather than having both systems sort of up side by side, what we could do is we could go into Power Apps and create a simple form that queried the legacy system for all the invoices and then showed it side by side inside of the same form as the normal pending invoices, so that they could go and do a quick lookup as invoices are coming in to make sure it hasn't been, or the invoice hasn't been sent in twice by the vendor and is going to be double paid. So there's something like that as an ideal way that the Power Platform at the time of implementation can add value and also maybe provide a throwaway solution, because eventually they wean themselves off of the legacy system. They don't need this form, so they could just remove that section on the pending invoices, and they're up and running. They're fine. So that's another thing about the Power Apps and some of the integrations or integration of data that you can do. You don't have to be. It's not such an arduous task to go out and create these new applications that you're so emotionally invested in them that you don't want to get rid of them. Once you're done with it, it's just a small change, and then you can just get rid of it. And it's no longer that crutch that you're using to help you get along for a period of time.
In that case, Murray, is that an example of like a Power App that sort of works in context of the D365 sort of operational data, or sort of in that case, I guess invoice related data? Is that where you're?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because there's a lot of integration with the Power Platform inside of Dynamics 365. So, for example, if you create a Power App, or a Canvas app, that's one of the simpler apps, then you can directly through the UI embed it into any form that you have, and also pass context to it. So it could go out and just, you could pass the vendor number or the invoice number or anything like that. So we're not sort of slapping just a page with no context on there. We can actually do some really, we can filter information out, and we can pass through context. We can go and grab information from Dynamics and bring it back in. So if you do this right, then the pages, the Power Apps that you can create will look like just a something that you would have written in X++ just normally, but it's a far simpler development process.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing, I think one of the earliest demos was that kind of a scenario. And I remember thinking it looked hugely valuable to be able to get that sort of contextual thing and sort of stick it in there, but it's also not so precious, to your point, that it can't be removed later if circumstances change or whatever. But I have to say, going back to like what Rachel, where your observation was, I'm shocked, frankly, that every partner isn't making these things part of their pre-sales efforts and showing it off to every existing customer as in terms of the progress that's being made. I mean, I'm putting my old pre-sales enterprise software hat on from, 15 years ago. And I really can't believe that that's not like right at the top of, or, embedded right in the heart of every demo these days.
I think change is hard. And to keep in mind that just because something's a part of a demo doesn't mean it becomes part of the scope either. So it's like we need not just pre-sales folks to be demoing and showing these things. And I think that's happening a lot more. But we also need the delivery folks at the partner communities to embrace these and understand these new technologies because, to them, they think that writing some X++ code is easy. That's what they've known. It's what they've done for the last umpteen years and the last however many implementations they've worked on. So doing something different is scary and risky. It's no different than any other kind of change management if you think about it. And again, right, I think to that point of, there wasn't a whole lot of documentation on how to put these two technologies together. I'm hopeful that this TechTalk series is helping with that and giving people bridging that gap of, here's all this great information about how to build a Power App, but how do I do this with F&O? Or why would I do this with F&O? What are the scenarios where this would apply? So I think there's still work to be done there. At least from my viewpoint, because I still see all too often that even if it was demoed, it got ripped out of the scope. It's the first thing to go because, we got to have a chart of accounts first and foremost. Kind of thing. So, and maybe we need to do more to evangelize this with the customers, the user community to kind of self-help themselves on some of these. I don't know.
So the next kind of last sort of AI builder specific thing I wanted to just ask you both about was your impressions of its accuracy. And I've been reading a little bit and thinking in just generally about sort of the accuracy of ML models. Do you have any sense when it comes to any of the particular capabilities, any particular tools in the AI Builder tool set, how well they work? Are you getting feedback from customers about how much it actually aids them when they put it into practice?
Yeah, so I'll start, and Rachel, you can add. These products are still very young. So they're being worked on and improved quite a lot as we go along. So to give an example, the forms processing and AI Builder, so the OCR within the system. Then when that first came out, you needed to train one set of invoices per model. And that meant that if you had different vendors and you had different models. So now we've got a collections option so that we can have a whole slew of different invoice options, and then it will go and recognize them for us. So that was a new feature that's just been added within the past couple of months to help extend it out. Then also to help us along, there was a new invoice processing model that is now in preview, which is more of a generic invoice processing model. And you can just give it any invoice and it will find all the details. It'll find the vendor, it'll find the address, it'll find the total, any dates that are associated with it. And it's a more generic method. When you combine those both together, when you have the sort of like the initial discovery and then the forms processing to go out and find all the details and the training within it, then that's an even better solution. But the accuracy is still based off, for example, for the forms processing is still leveraging the Azure Cognitive Services, which is, from what we've seen, pretty accurate. But it does, as you go through this, there's still always, you need to test it yourself and make sure that the things that you're giving to the AI builder is clean enough for you to go out and actually use.
And I think, to that last point you were making, Murray, like it's like the general philosophy of ERP, garbage in equals garbage out. If you give it, good quality examples to train your model with, you're likely to have better results. I have heard some feedback that there still needs to be some improvements with identifying like white space, like it doesn't identify like tables of data, if there's too much white space in between rows, so there's definitely little things like that, but it's constantly improving. And I think different models have different needs and best practices and recommendations, so it's important to kind of look at that. But pretty much all of the different models that are out there have some sort of analysis of how accurate your model is. And I think that's important, so if you need to improve it. Like if you're doing an object detection model and it's only, say, 70% accurate, and you're looking for something that's more like 80 to 90% accurate, you need to do more work with it. But I would also, ask you the question, like, if you did this 100% manually and it's right 70% of the time, and it doesn't require additional manual user intervention, that's a 70% improvement on whatever said manual process was before. So, but I think in general, I think most of these different models are more in the 90% range, or even, closing in on the 95 to 99% range of accuracy. But it's also dependent upon what data you give it.
All right, that sounds fair, and so it is still work that each customer has to do to really understand what kind of results they're getting and what the system can and can't do, I guess, with their particular data, their particular process. So just to kind of reiterate, you've done about, I guess, did you just recently do another session in the series itself on mixed reality? I'm just sort of looking at the calendar.
Yep. So
here.
10 parts down, 2 more to go. So mixed reality was last week. Coming up next week, we have industry accelerators. And then the first week in February, we have customer voice, which was formerly Forms Pro.
Yep.
So kind of how to leverage that with your Dynamics 365 Enterprise application.
Yeah, and just looking backwards, I mean, you've covered Canvas apps, model-driven apps, portals, UI flows, Power Automate, and Dataverse.
Yeah. At the time, it was still called Common Data Service, but now it's called Dataverse.
Yes. So, I mean, you've given a pretty broad look across the landscape here. Are there other things that you're sort of excited to look ahead to in 2021 as you sort of look out on what the year has to come for each of your roles? Rachel, I'll start with you.
Yeah, definitely. I think kind of a couple things, so FastTrack recently announced our FastTrack expansion program, where we're now extending the FastTrack and Success by Design framework out to the partner community for customers that spend $100,000 or more in licensing. So there's a lot of really cool, exciting things going on there, and Success by Design training and the new portal for partners. So that's super exciting. I've been involved on the back end of that, helping put a lot of that content together. I also have 3 more Tech Talk series that I'm kind of stewing and brewing up behind the scenes to kind of kick off after this series is done. One of them is going to be a workflow focused series, and I'm excited with some of the new Power Automate the Flow button that they've added into D365 and showing some examples and really how to get the best of both worlds with all the workflow capabilities we have in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations along with Power Automate. I've also got another series that I'm working on with one of my FastTrack colleagues, Eric Pigors, where we're going to focus in on your chart of accounts and planning your chart. It's a little geeky and a little financy, if you will, but that's another one of my passions. And then I've also got another series that I'm focusing on HR functionality. So that one's actually pretty close, like in terms of drafting what all is going to go into that. Right now, it's looking like it's about a 6 or 7 part series that's going to dive into all the functionality of Dynamics 365 Human Resources. Obviously, there's a lot of great stuff on the roadmap, and I'm sure there'll be some one-offs here and there for some of those features as well. And I know a lot of my colleagues are doing some pretty great stuff. I'm excited about the new production control, job card device. If you joined us for the mixed reality session, Murray kind of sneak peek showed a little bit of that with the Dynamics 365 guides, but there's some fantastic stuff with warehouse management, the new mobile device look and feel there. So there's so much and a lot of great tech talks lined up, over the next 6 months.
Yeah, and I'm excited about some of the new functionality that is just coming out within Dynamics 365. And Rachel talked about one of them, which is the guides integration with the manufacturing execution. So if someone is going out and they have a task that they need to do on a piece of equipment or on an assembly task, then they can go out and they can use mixed reality. They can use the HoloLens, and you can create a guide that they scan directly from the manufacturing execution, and then it will give them the augmented instructions so that they don't have to go out and do anything, don't have to have any paper or any instructions along there. We're seeing a lot more of the integration of all of the other Microsoft technologies directly into finance and supply chain. Other items which are really interesting are the insights functionality that has, I think it's in preview right now, for example, like the financial insights or the payment predictor, the cash flow analysis. All of that goes out and it uses AI to go out and create the forecasts and create in the case of the payment prediction, whether if you give someone a cash and early payment discount, what's the propensity that they're going to pay you back for that. Then also I'm really excited about the convergence of the back office and the front office applications. The CE and the field service and the project operations sort of capabilities are now blurring in with asset management and the account management through dual write, and then also the project management within Dynamics 365. So the suite that we're sort of demonstrating now is now this more holistic view, which is completely integrated in real time between two systems that in the past have been siloed to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
All of those are great, and then all the new capabilities in the Power Platform are just exciting to tinker with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot. And then probably be able to add a few more things. I was just thinking as you talked, there's also the next release wave documentation is coming out, I think in the end of January, right? It's scheduled. And then before, previews start then later in early spring, something like that. So even more to probably be revealed, I would guess, of new previews. Well, I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for the rest of this series. I didn't catch the mixed reality yet, so I'm going to have to see that recording, and I'll be on the lookout for the other ones because they're all great topics. So thanks both of you for taking the time today. It's been fun. We'll have to maybe have you back after Rachel, maybe after you've developed another 1 or 2 of these series to kind of catch up on what all has been showed off.
Isn't there going to be a fireside chat that we're going to talk about the entire series?
Yeah, it's something that we've been talking about doing, bringing all of our presenters back together and doing a live session, almost like an open office hours fireside chat. Murray has agreed to bring his pet squirrel to the session. Now it's public, right?
My visually impaired squirrel. So.
Oh, your visually impaired squirrel. He's going to bring his visually impaired squirrel.
Yeah.
And, we're going to have a fireside chat and talk with everyone about kind of like what it took to put the series together, answer questions that people might have, follow up on some of the things, like, because we did have a number of open questions from some of the earlier sessions that we've got answers on now, and help try to address those. So that'll likely get added on here in the next couple of weeks and happen sometime in the mid-February timeframe.
Awesome. I have to look for that too. Yeah. Send me a link or whatever when that's up, and we can get that sort of publicized as well. Well, thanks both of you for taking the time today. This has been fun. I'll be keeping my eye on this stuff.
Definitely. Thanks for having us, Jason.
Yeah, it was our pleasure.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Rachel Profitt and Murray Fife. We'll post a link to the full series of webcast recordings, and you can see what's coming up as well. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. You can also look for us on Twitter and on LinkedIn. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.